All right, howdy folks. This is going to be another rendition of To Crack or Not to Crack by Top Comics Pressing. So here I have 5 slabs from a client. These were all relatively recent CGC submissions, and they were a little baffled by some of the grades and maybe just missed a couple of things. And so what I thought I'd do is just run through these, just kind of as we have been. So the first issue here is in X-Men number 103. So this is before it was officially Uncanny X-Men, but it's from the original X-Men run. This is very early on in the Chris Claremont run that started with the epic key issue X-Men number 94. This is one of the original appearances here at Black Tom and the Juggernaut, I believe, and it's, an overall really sharp shape. So it says 9.2, but if we scroll around this book, there might be a spine tick right there, but the corners look really sharp, as you can see, and the edges are all pretty free of some wear. And this book was pressed by CCS, so I'll get to that here in a second. The client had sent these to CCS beforehand, and you can see across the top there's a pretty good wave in that glare as I scroll that back there. And so this is what in presser speak we'd probably refer to as bacon, because it looks like a crispy strip of bacon with a very clear wave pattern. So it has at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 periods to it if you're familiar with wave math. So nothing glaring on the front. If we look on the back, again, we can see the nice bacon wave across the top. But other than that, the corners look sharp. There's nothing too crazy there. Very clean. Maybe that one's just a hair crunched, but that's actually the bottom spine, and so that would be a binding tear. You should be able to get a 9.8 with that. Nothing jumping out at me. So looking at the grader's notes, and I'll pull that up there so you can get the serial if you'd like it. But this one has unavailable as the grader notes, which of course is a tragic outcome that is all too frequent, especially with these 9.0 books. And I don't mind them skipping the grader notes on books that have clear, if this had 5 or 6 spine ticks and maybe a little small quarter crease or some very obvious finger bends, I don't mind that because you can kind of deduce that. But in this case where it's kind of a mystery, it's kind of unfortunate. And so I think what they did is, if you look here, this has kind of a pink background. You can see it in kind of Storm's cape, and you can kind of see it in Storm's hair. And you can kind of see it in the background here. And then if we flip it over, you can definitely see Evel Knievel looks more like a pirate captain in his red shirt than he does Evel Knievel in a white outfit. So you can see all that pink all the way through here and all the way down here. So that, I always had referred to that as red ink bleed. I think CGC calls it ink transfer. And I went and looked at their nice grading book that they have here, and the closest thing I can find to categorize it is ink transfer, which they say can be between 8.0 to 9.8, and you can see some of that red ink transfer is given as an example here. And so I think they're dinging it for that red ink bleed, red ink transfer, and the good news is that's fixable. So I can hit this with the blue LED for a pretty good irradiation, and it might not take care of all of it, but I think it'll lighten it up to a point, especially on the back here, where it won't be dinged by CGC. And so this one, after a careful inspection of the border, as well as looking for other defects, I think is worth cracking, especially because these early Claremont books in very high grade are pretty highly sought after, and I think this one has a decent chance at a 9.6 when it comes back after some work. At the very least, it'll give me an opportunity to fix the CCS bacon across the top there. All right, the next one up is one of my favorite covers here from the early Cockroom run, and this is epic to me because X-Men number 1, of course, features Magneto with his magnetic shield being blasted by Cyclops, and then having the X-Men team kind of pile onto Magneto. So, the very first 1963 Uncanny X-Men, or X-Men, has that. This is now kind of the new Claremont X-Men, or at the time was kind of the new X-Men, launching both in Giant Size X-Men as well as Chris Claremont's X-Men 94. And so this is the first time that the new X-Men here kind of gang up on Magneto, and this is a clear homage to the original X-Men cover. Not only that, this exact same scene then is homaged one more time in the very popular Jim Lee 4-panel early 90s X-Men #1, which is the most printed comic book of all time, where it kind of spans that whole sequence. We get Magneto on the first one, and then Cyclops and Wolverine, and then the rest of the X-Men going to Xavier, you know, having added a number of X-Men in the years since, including Gambit and Rogue. And so I think that that's awesome. And so this one is kind of right there in the middle, featuring the new X-Men. All right, that being stated, let's go look at what the grader notes say at a 9.0. It says grader notes unavailable. All right, well, that's very disappointing and not very helpful. So now we have to kind of put on our eyes. And what I see down here is a very small staple tear on that bottom staple. So that's an obvious thing that can kind of jump out at me. And I think what the real problem is here is you have this kind of color lift or color pull going on right here. And I looked in the grader note, or in the CGC book for that as well. And there's unfortunately a pretty big range given. But I think it goes under ink lift, which I'll pull up the page right here. And this says 9.0 to 9.8 for kind of minor ink lift, which we might see, you know, at least it resembles this Taskmaster issue here. You know, you can see some there. So I think that this is coming in at the lower end of that ink lift range from 9.0 to 9.8. And the reason I think it's there is because it's pretty clear on the orange going up along here. You know, it does have some very light tanning across the back as well. So, you know, all those things will affect the grade. But this one, I think, is going to be best left as is, because I don't think we're going to be able to do anything for this major defect right here, which is all this ink lift kind of on the side. So that one I'm going to leave as a do not crack. Sliding up here now, we have two different copies of X-Men #121. So this is the first full appearance of Alpha Flight. It's become a very popular issue as of late, and I'm sure that there's some speculation buzzing about how Alpha Flight is going to appear eventually in the long term in the MCU. So both of these issues here have slightly lower grades than I think the owner was hoping for, and the 8.0 copy, you know, looks pretty sharp on first glance. So the covers are tight. We have a little bit of maybe some dirt there that wasn't cleaned off on the spine. But if we go look at the CGC grader notes, it says staining to cover, and so now we should start looking for that staining, and it looks pretty good up top. But if we roll down to the bottom here, which unfortunately overlaps with the plastic, but right along here you can see that the bottom edge has a good amount of staining. It's not heavy, but it is there through most of that bottom edge. And the same is going to be true on the front cover. So if you look right there, kind of right along the snow, you can see that there's some staining there. And so this one, I think with that as being the primary defect and the only thing noted, particularly on these late 70s books, they tend to respond very well to stain removal. And so I think this one's a great candidate for a crack and some stain removal. So I'm going to put this one in the to crack category. Sliding right on up here to the 6.5 copy. Let me make sure you can get the serial there first. And we'll slide up here to the 6.5 copy. Make sure you can get that one as well. So this one has a little bit more exhaustive cover notes. So it says light spine stress lines to cover. Now you can have a lot of light spine stress lines to cover even at a 9.4 or a 9.6, and so that is not going to explain the 6.5 grade. But indeed, if we go looking for them, you can see a spine tick right there, spine tick right there. And, you know, there's a very fine tick that does break color right in there. So that's okay, but that's not going to explain the grade. It says light tears to cover, and so we should go looking for those presumably around the edge of the book. We're not seeing anything jump out at me here on the front. So we'll go look at the back cover. Now, CGC is pretty forgiving on small tears, and so for it to meaningfully affect the grade, I think it would have to be a fairly large tear. I don't see anything on the perimeter so far. I think they mean right in here on the bottom. If we look on that open edge, you can kind of see that there are several very small tears right along that open edge. To me, that also is not going to affect the grade in any meaningful way, but I don't see anything that would explain the low grade in terms of the tears So there we go. What does explain the 6.5 grade is moderate staining to cover, and we can see some of that. These are both from the same collection, and so that staining is going to be roughly in the same spot. We can see it right there. There's a little bit of foxing or staining, and I think some of those spots along the spine they hit for staining. I never know if they count this stuff as tanning or as staining, and you can see it all along through here. It's just the whole bottom cover edge. Does have that staining through there. So I'm going to turn it. And so that's what this book is getting slammed for, is this line right across here that leads to a tied line. And so that should be very fixable. And so this one I think is going to make a clear crack. And let's see if we can bump it. Ideally, we could bump it up to a 9.0 range. And so I'm pretty excited for that. All right, the last one here, moving from XMen to DC, is a copy of Black Lightning #1. So this is an 8.0 copy, but again, I personally think it looks better than an 8.0. So if I look at the corner there, it's sharp. If I look at the corner there, it's sharp. If I scroll down the spine, you know, no clear spine ticks. If I look at the bottom, there's a very small binding tear, but again, you can have a 9.8 with that. And if I go look down the bottom there, again, it looks pretty sharp to a sharp corner. If I look here, again, pretty smooth, pretty sharp corner there. Pretty sharp corner. Pretty sharp corner. And so this one I'm kind of at a loss for. So again, I'm thankful that there are CGC notes for me to go look at. And this one kind of baffles me, to be perfectly honest. It says choose right bottom of front cover. So if I grab my CGC grading handbook here and I look at what they call a chew, so there's the chew page. Of course, the 8.0 is within that 8.5 range, but chews here are clearly, you know, missing paper, chewed out paper. This definitely has ink or, you know, paper missing. This has, you know, a whole chunk of that spine exposed. So those are all pretty obvious to me to be called a chew. If we look at the edge here, so these notes, and again, I'll let you grab that serial number, specify right bottom front cover. So that's very explicit where we could be for a chew. And the only thing I can think of is right here, there is a chip, right? And so that looks like maybe there is a speck of paper missing that is no bigger than a, you know, pen head or pencil head. I certainly don't see anything along the bottom. And literally the only thing I can see is a little fleck out of that cover. Now, to me, it doesn't even look like it goes through the cover. I think it is actually just a printing defect or part of the brick, you know, the shattered glass. Like, it's almost supposed to be there, to be perfectly honest. But again, it says choose bottom right front cover. And I do not see anything that would look like a chew. I mean, that's a little bit of ink missing right there, but I mean, geez, that's like a millimeter. And then this spot is probably a gripper hole from the paper gripper. And so that's a manufacturing thing. So I have no idea. So this one I think is a clear crack and resubmit, and just hope somebody was having a bad day when they graded it the first time. All right, so out of our 5 books here, I think we've got a crack because I can't find the chews, and it seems really harsh on a really nice, beautiful looking copy. This one does have clear staining, so I think it is accurately graded, but I think it's improvable. And the same is true with this one. It does have that very light staining, but I think we can improve that. This one has that red ink bleed through, and so we're gonna blast that thing with some blue light to take care of all that transfer. And then we're going to leave this one as is, because we're never gonna be able to fix these dots going up and down there. All right, so hopefully you got some entertainment here and maybe a little bit of know-how from this video. If so, please go ahead and find that subscribe button. Please give me a thumbs up right there on YouTube. Also, feel free to find me on Instagram or Facebook. Top Comics Pressing on all sites. Thank you for your attention.